Today we're going to be talking to Brenda Schmidt, the CEO of Coplex. Brenda, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm so good and really happy to be talking to you. You've been doing so many amazing new things with Coplex, and I just can't wait to hear all about them.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity.
First and foremost, I'd love to kind of talk about your journey getting to Coplex and what Coplex does.
Yeah, I didn't start out early in my career as an entrepreneur like lots of folks. I actually worked for a very large organization for about 15 years. But looking back, I was really always an entrepreneur. I was a hand raiser. So if they said, hey, you want to do this? I'm like, sure. For a lot of things, I really didn't know how to do it. But it was a great training ground for really getting exposed to lots of different things. And the last 6 years there, I was actually responsible for a division in Latin America. I had about $100 million P&L. And I really negotiated getting laid off to be able to because I was like, I am never going to make the impact that I could if I just started my own business. And if it fails, I know I could always go back and work for a large organization. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated, is they just can't impact change fast enough with a large organization, or the thread between what you do every day and the impact you're making is really, really hard to see. You get really good at PowerPoints and Excel and reports, but it's hard to see sort of that impact. And so I left there in 2005 to start my first venture, and I knew nothing about institutional capital. So I had 18 months of severance because I'd worked there for so long. And so in my mind, I had to build a profitable company in 18 months because I just wasn't thinking about, that was, my husband was like, are you going to get a job yet? Because I was like burning through cash. And so I think one of the things, that's just the hallmark of entrepreneurs, you're resourceful and you're resilient. And so I applied for a small business innovation research grant. I didn't get it. The clock is ticking. So I was like, in my bedroom trying to build this company. And so I did a pilot at Holy Cross Hospital down in Nogales at part of the Carondelet Health System. And that went really well. And then showed up at a conference and I picked up $1 million client. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but I have no money to actually scale this business. And I was really honest with them, and they prepaid me $250,000 a quarter because, and I think one of the lessons that I learned is if you get product market fit right, if you have a product, I love white spaces. If you have a product that's really meeting a market need, you'll find the money to build that business. I mean, if somebody really needs it, they will help you build the business. So I bootstrapped that for about 10 years. Honestly, over those 10 years, it was probably 3 or 4 different businesses, as that probably happens, but I never raised any institutional capital, but the experiences that I had in that business really made me realize the opportunity for what then became Solera. So I knew a venture investment banker in New York who I kind of kept in touch with. And I said, Jonathan, I think I need to raise some money because I've got to build this software platform. And I know there's a market need out there for it. And he gave me 3 names. He goes, hey, go talk to these people. So those personal relationships are really, really important when you want to get into venture. And so I talked to one of them and I raised a $3 million Series A with honestly the only person I ever talked to. Again, I had product market fit right, and also the type of venture backer that was interested in that type of solution. So it was a lot more efficient, but I knew nothing. Again, they said, well, send me your cap table. And I was like, well, it's super easy. Like I still own 100% of the company. Like, not because I'm selfish. I just didn't know how to give away equity. And so, I raised a $3 million round at a $6 million pre, so sold 30% of the company day one. And then it went on to raise 72 million at Solera. I think that I'm a go big or go home. I want to see more people in Phoenix think really big. I mean, you have all the support in the world here in Phoenix for building big companies. But after 4 years at Solera, I left to actually start something new. And I had done all the market validation and research about that business. And then with COVID, it just didn't make sense. And so I'd known Zach Ferris for a long time, and, would be a mentor to healthcare ventures coming through Coplex, but I didn't really know what they did. And so he and I went out to lunch in January of 2020, and he's like, would you like to join the organization and come in as president? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And once I really understood what Coplex did, I was just incredibly impressed. Incredibly impressed what Zach had built, not only with the ecosystem and community within the Phoenix market that he developed, but the process that made building a business, which is really, really hard, more of a repeatable science and less about guesswork, that you knew when to say no, that you knew when you should go forward, when you had the discipline around validation to get the data that you needed to have high confidence that the venture was going to be successful. But I thought that there was a bigger opportunity for the business. And so I stepped in as CEO actually just about a year ago. It'll be a year on Sunday. So it'll be my—
Congratulations.
But it was interesting as a CEO because I had always been a founder and a CEO. And it was the first time I had stepped in as a CEO of an industry I really didn't know anything about. I knew nothing about venture building and studios. And so I just went into learner mode, and I called every studio around the world, asked a bunch of questions, and then, really tried to figure out whether healthcare was the place where Coplex should pivot to, at least initially, and then did that. So pivoted the organization to from really working with early stage founders and building technology businesses more broadly to partnering with large enterprise corporate clients and spinning out their great ideas in VC and IP, in addition to working with great founders and building ventures that I think meet three criteria for us. They're big markets and big opportunities. They fit our thesis areas around the things that we're really passionate around, impact and building, and that we can have a meaningful equity stake as we're building those businesses. So, it's been really, really fun and really valuable to, in my learning experience to be part of Coplex.
Yeah, I mean, the journey from, being in one industry and then in 18 months, essentially building something completely new, scaling that, and then, going off to do it again, and then join the Coplex team and being able to identify, the importance of medical-based startups and kind of putting your expertise into something almost like merging what you had experience in with something that you were learning how to scale, and just, kind of creating this amazing product.
Yeah, I think people were really surprised when I left Solera, but I'm super self-aware. What I'm really, really good at is like 0 to 30 million or 0 to 50 million. I love identifying white spaces in the market. I love figuring out product market fit and unit economics and business model. Like, I love that. And what's great about being at Coplex is I get to do that simultaneously and repeatedly for lots of different businesses that I really enjoy building, and not just one. And I don't have to be the one that has all the risk associated with those businesses. I now have a ready-made team around me that's really, really talented in putting the discipline around building the new ventures.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of people in the Valley, Coplex is obviously a huge name within, my world. I hear it almost every day.
Wow.
All the time. It's, Coplex and the industries that you've helped grow, and the companies and the impact when they grow, you're always a part of their growth stories. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like you said, being able to have that experience of the 0 to 50 million, 30 million, there are so many companies that you can do that with. So it's like you get to continuously be a part of this growth journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's really interesting too. I mean, what we're really focused on is finding those white spaces, finding out opportunities in the market, and then going on and spending really 3 or 4 months saying, what is the market? Who are the competitors? Is this an area where we should be focusing on? And then leaning into business design, and then 3 or 4 months of validation before we ever start the company, before we ever lay a line of code. And I think that discipline really helps in that, making sure, should we really be forming this company? I mean, does this company have a right to exist and an opportunity to be a market leader in its category? And I think that's sometimes it takes a harsh reality of a third party to bring that perspective, as opposed to, because a lot of times for entrepreneurs, yes, you do need to plow through and you do need to have grit, but sometimes you also have to say, you know what, this isn't either the right business model, or it's not the right time, or it's not, and go just try something new, whether it's a pivot or a new business or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to know kind of the journey of, day one, starting, as a Coplex venture, kind of what that journey looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in our corporate clients, it's a little bit different. In our corporate clients, we may take 15, 20, 30 ideas and spend a series of days really looking at those opportunities and narrowing them down to those that are broadly considered, yeah, these could be new companies. Sometimes they're like, yeah, that's super interesting, but it's really a product. It's not really a business. And then some of them are like, somebody's already doing that and you may have figured out in a way, but it's not really a big market opportunity. So we narrow those down and then take a few of those. Typically, I try to balance the portfolio between what I call quick wins, what could be a 10 or $20 million exit in a couple of years, which may not be hugely exciting for VC, but that's a great exit for a founder. But it starts to fuel that sustainability. And then order a couple of big bets that may take 7 to 10 years, but they're the more, 100, 200, $500 million exits. And then we really do 3 weeks of discovery, where we take a step back and we do early market calls. We do a whole, primary and secondary research, and we've got enough information to say, we understand the market. We know how big it is. We think this is still interesting. The market is signaling that there's interest. And then we go into business design. And, we take out the typical business design canvas. But I think what I really like about what Coplex developed in the process, as opposed to just completing it all and saying, okay, great, we know who our buyer is and how we're going to sell it, is then we're saying, what are all the assumptions that we're making? If we're making a lot of assumptions here. And so we rack and stack those assumptions, the ones that are the most important, that we have the least confidence, that we really have data to support that assumption. We go out in the market and we do 3 and 4 months of validation. So at that point, we might be standing up, typical growth hacking, standing up dummy websites. We're doing wireframes, functional prototypes, and we're out there talking to, both quantitative and qualitative research that's giving us really, really good signal that with this business model, with this buyer, with these unit economics, we can make this business work. And sometimes the buyer is really excited about it, but you just realize the unit economics just don't work, or, the barriers to actually building that business are too high. So we do that either when a founder comes to us or whether a big corporate client comes to us. And at that point, we say, okay, now we're going to form a new company. And I think what was a little bit different in the previous Coplex is we would take warrants in those new companies, and then they would sort of graduate. And then we'd say, great, we're here, good luck, and we're cheering for you. Yeah. I think with the new Coplex, we see ourselves as institutional co-founders, that we are actually part of that co-founding team and can wrap so much of those resources and expertise that we have around a founder, or certainly in partnership with a large corporate client, that's de-risking those businesses significantly at a cost that's probably much less than if they tried to go out and just hire people at that stage, and just really try to build the business in a really lean way. So I think of ourselves as institutional co-founders who are taking meaningful common equity shares. And then I am raising a fund. I'm raising a $30 million fund, just for things that are coming through the studio. We're not going to look like VC, where we're doing a bunch of deal flow. But for people who are coming through the studio, I want to be able to meaningfully invest in those businesses for preferred shares. And honestly, they should never graduate, right? If we're shareholders in those businesses, we should support them and continue to have, follow their trajectory and be supportive, board roles and things like that over time. So we're really now looking at, we only want to spin out maybe 6 or 10. Our goal this year is 6. We're going to spin 6 new codes out this year, which doesn't sound like a lot. And then in other instances, it sounds like a whole lot. So, given that it's April, almost 15th, but all in healthcare, all around certain themes, mental health and happiness, healthy aging, connecting to communities, using marketplaces to organize data and resources. And so really focused on areas where I think there's both an opportunity and a passion among the people who work at Coplex for building those businesses and making an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I was a little curious about is previously Coplex had been, come in as an experienced founder with your company, or come in with an idea as kind of the expert in that field. Kind of with this new shift and really being long-term partners and co-founders, what stage should a company kind of be coming to you guys?
It's been interesting is we've got folks now coming to us with all different kinds of phases. That people typically aren't just coming with an idea. Some are, and they're just coming with an idea, but we've got other folks with a fully formed company with some market experience, and they're like, we're ready to go. And we're like, you know what, you skipped a few steps early on. So typically, even though that are coming with a product and they may actually have a technology, I mean, we have some of our corporate clients that they're out with either their app in the app store or they're using it internally, and it is a thing, but they haven't really taken the big step back of that's great, but could this really be a really successful company? And let's take a couple steps back to, again, go through this repeatable process and have forced discipline around the stage gates to say, yep, this one made it, and we're going to go through and continue through the process. And I think that's part of the magic of what we do is using data to make good decisions around letting the great businesses go through and killing the things that aren't going to be great businesses. They may be good businesses, but I think we're really focused on those things that both have high financial value and also have social impact. So I'm really focused. So yeah, we spun out our first corporate startup, which is Hoop Medical. What I love about what we're doing is even that corporate client is Minnesota. The startup is here. So if we can spin out 5 to 10 startups over the next 5 years, and we have 50 more health tech startups in the Phoenix community, I'll be super thrilled. So they started with us, and they're going to raise their Series A this summer, but they have a $2.5 million run rate right now, 6 months later. And we just got it right so that when they hit the market, we knew where to go and how to get that product market fit for them really, really quickly.
Yeah. And I had known historically Coplex didn't just have people based in Arizona. They were kind of all over. Is that still kind of the thought, or are you really kind of zeroing in on certain markets?
No, I mean, I really want to create Phoenix as a health tech hub. So half the team, a little over half the team is still here in Phoenix. But I do have people all over. I mean, I think what COVID has allowed us all to do is find the best talent, really with, weapons free from where those folks actually lived, because I've never met them. I've never met over half the team at Coplex. In fact, when I started as CEO, we were already working from home and we haven't come back yet. So we've all gotten to know each other and how to work efficiently with each other remotely. So no, I mean, I'm really just trying to find the best people that are, complementing the skill sets of the team as we continue to grow.
That's the best way to do it. If you're talented and you can work remotely, why not?
I know. So
I'd love to know too, on the note of, being kind of a split up team, and then also as you're going through and kind of vetting the need within the market, having gone through COVID for a year during the time, how do you think that's impacted determining maybe product market fit or timing how have you adjusted with that?
It's actually, especially in healthcare, driven so many different opportunities to create businesses. It was an inflection point around telehealth. So now you've got all these regulatory tailwinds where telehealth was really struggling to take a foothold because there were so many regulations against scaling those business models efficiently. And so we're actually building a couple of telehealth models. And the other is I think the real focus on mental health and adolescent and children's mental health. I think that now there's just a huge focus on some of the other things that maybe didn't get as much attention before, where there's huge business opportunities. The other piece is around really leaning into LGBTQ, BIPOC, culturally competent niches for businesses where they may be an incumbent out there and they're doing really well, but they're reaching, I always say 48-year-old white women, they're really easy, low-hanging fruit. I got 20% market share and nobody's really doing the hard work to reach the 80%. I've seen really, really interesting business opportunities there with the realization around the need for greater health equity, the need for really providing culturally competent care and reaching people that are a little bit more disenfranchised from the current healthcare system. So I think it's actually just driven this huge opportunity for healthcare startups, especially in niche markets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like whenever someone mentions healthcare, med tech, all those things, investors' heads just kind of turn.
Oh my gosh. You've seen the amount of money being raised is like, it was billions in the first quarter, billions. And, it's funny because I was talking to someone about, raising this $30 million fund. And they said, you know what, it would almost be easier for you to raise 150 million than 30 million because people have so much money that they need to put at work. They want to write bigger checks. And so I think it's the amount of money out there right now is just incredible. And I think part of it is you've got new investors who typically weren't investing in healthcare, understanding not only is it a huge part of the GDP, it's growing. And there's this massive opportunity and transformation to start investing in healthcare, where maybe traditionally they weren't healthcare investors. So there's just so much money pouring into the sector. But it does require a certain amount of domain expertise to actually build businesses in healthcare. You've got to understand how the money flows and all of the compliance and regulatory, that's where I thought that Coplex could actually carve out a really interesting niche as a venture studio, because of that expertise that the team has in getting that credibility and confidence with our partners that we know what we're doing in that space, in that we can not only efficiently go to market, but not get them in trouble from a compliance perspective.
Yeah. And I mean, on the note of investors and investment, when you're looking for people to help put into these funds, or, when you're looking for investors to kind of join the community, I mean, you have a world of experience in this market. How do you kind of like choose who gets to be a part of it?
I certainly have my no jerks rule. The older I get, the more I just want to, have people in my circle that are, just good people and aligned on the mission. So I think, honestly, the first is like, are you really aligned with the mission and what we're trying to do? So, I mean, I think that is really, really important, because over the long term, you need people who are sharing that vision as you're building your company. They're just good people, and you enjoy being around them because they do become part of that broader family. But I really like strategic investors. I mean, money is fungible. The money is money, and there's all kinds of opportunities to get money. But if you can get a strategic investor that has an opportunity either to provide expertise or to provide distribution or network, those are always, if you have aligned incentives to make at one of Coplex's businesses or Coplex successful, and add more value beyond just money, I like those kinds of investors. So I like investors who are clients. I like investors who are potential clients. I like that. Those make a lot more difference to me than just getting a VC that can write a check.
Yeah. I mean, the money is one thing, but experience and connections really are invaluable.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And just credibility, I think, that, if this one is investing in you and they're a healthcare investor, then you've sort of checked the minimum box of due diligence that they did to invest. And so down the line, people typically do maybe a little bit less because you've already checked that box from a credibility perspective.
So, I mean, kind of going back to earlier in our conversation with you joining Coplex, I mean, when you had that conversation with Zach, was there like a moment where it just clicked, or some type of like, this is why I'm going to join this organization?
It's funny at first, I came in as a contractor and I wasn't really sure, is this the job? And I don't even know that Zach really knew like what my role might be. And I literally was like walking around with this notebook, can you come in this conference room? And I was just trying to figure it out. And I don't know, at that point, there wasn't this sort of end game of what that might look like. I just learned over the couple months when I came in, more in an operational role, that there's a there, not only, for studios in general, but Coplex. And studios are having a moment. I mean, 4 or 5 studios raised over $1 billion just in March.
Wow.
But I think, what I loved about it, having experienced VC, and VC is really tough because, you either, you have to have almost artificially high growth. And, typically they've got a portfolio theory approach where I'm going to have one real successful company and to fund the 9 that might not be successful. And your incentives really are never aligned fully. And so what I love about studios is that all of the incentives should be aligned to support that startup and that startup operator. So I think studios as an asset class, if you look at the research so far, and again, it's early, much higher rate of returns, much higher success rate of the ventures, because really they should all be successful. If we're killing the things and we have good data, then nothing should really be a failure. There's, singles, doubles, triples, grand slams, and there's kind of, the portfolio will look different, but I'm not expecting that anything that we launch is not going to be successful, or we should have killed it. We didn't do the right thing from a process perspective to kill that venture. So that's where I'm excited. I think that's where a lot of money is coming into studios, because very different than an accelerator or an incubator, which is more of, hey, I have a problem thesis or interest area. I'm going to go out and find startups We're going to bring them in, give them some space, maybe some money, access to data, and mentorship and network, and help them. Studios are really saying, what are the problem areas and what should be built and what is the best way to build them? And then placing an operator who sometimes isn't the founder that shows up. The founder may be a physician or, an engineer or something. And then placing that operator and that operating team that are the best suited to build that, because sometimes you've got a great product and a wrong operator, or you've got a great operator and the wrong product, and the opportunity to mesh those, give them some money, and have an installed distribution base for those ventures, I think is a magical combination for making these ventures more successful. It's hard. It's so hard to be. It is so hard to be a startup. I mean, and part of it is that you got this, that this can be successful and you're so excited about what you're building. And then you spend a year like knocking on people's doors and trying to get, clients. And that's why I like partnering with large corporations, because if it's their idea, they have a meaningful equity stake. We have an installed, not only incentive, but an installed distribution base for those startups within the folks that are hiring us to build out those new cos.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing that just made me think of a whole other element to your job is you were talking about like someone who brings the idea might be, like you said, a physician and not end up being the CEO or founder. There has to be a whole level of matchmaking that you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost like, it's like dating, finding with multiple people, because it's finding the right, investor groups, maybe the founding team, figuring out that dynamic. I mean, that has to be like a whole job in itself.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the studios, we've all sort of, established a relationship, because this is not a volume game. It's value. And so the High Alpha just raised a bunch of money there in Indianapolis. They only do SaaS models, and they may have people that come to them and it's not a SaaS model. I'm like, if it's healthcare, send them over to us. And so, we do the same thing with operators. Hey, I've got somebody who just had an exit. Do you have a venture they might be right for? So we're actually looking at sort of creating a shared pool of talent that we can share across these ventures, whether they're serial entrepreneurs or people that are, really talented and high in their career that are ready to come in and be at a startup. But you're right, it takes finding the right person. But what's interesting about, placing an operator in a studio company is it's typically mid-career. It's not somebody who's going to make $60,000 a year working out of their garage for, a huge amount of equity. It's somebody who wants to make between $150,000 and $200,000 a year and make 10 or 20% of the company. And that's just a different type of maybe entrepreneur, but they're probably a little bit further in their career and realizing if we can make a big business, that 10, 20% is hugely valuable, but that business is de-risked. They're taking less equity because we've already de-risked that business to a large extent when we place the operator and head out into the market.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think about, in my time where I've worked for large enterprise level companies, the people that I'm looking at that are, VPs and that are like, oh, I'm thinking about doing a change. I mean, those are high level people who know how to make money for a large organization. And it makes all the sense in the world to have there actually be less risk bringing one of those industry expert operators into a startup.
Yeah, because they don't have to know all those early processes around discovery and business design and validation. It's like, we've got all that done.
Yeah.
Here's a roadmap. Here's even a product roadmap. You need to come in and take the helm and build a team and grow it, which is a little bit of a different skill set than those super, super early stages in that 0 to 0.5, not even 0 to 1, when you're trying to figure out whether this thing actually should go out and be in market. But it's really fun. It's been really fun to just get to know a whole lot of people and evaluate these different ideas in the market and then go out and talk to so many people around healthcare and what's happening in healthcare and where those opportunities might be. So it's been, especially now sort of coming out of COVID, the hospitals and the health systems and the payers, they're not solely just focused on COVID. And I feel like their heads are coming up a little bit and now saying, okay, now we can get back to thinking more strategically and longer term around something other than just COVID.
Yeah. And, I have one kind of big final question for you. I mean, you see so many interesting startups and different concepts coming out and changes to the market and things happening in the economy. I mean, what are you personally most excited about? Like what do you just like wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is what the day is?
That's hard because there's a lot of things I get excited about.
I know.
I think I really I love marketplaces. It's what, I built at Solera, but I think now with all of the different startups coming up, think about digital therapeutics or digital health, there's this huge opportunity to organize and aggregate them. There's almost like this opportunity now to create marketplaces of these things to really drive consumer engagement through matching and through personalization. So I really like the opportunity to aggregate resources and aggregate marketplaces. I'm super passionate around integrating community benefit organizations, community service organizations into healthcare. I spend a lot of time thinking about financing mechanisms for that. How do you actually finance getting paid a food bank and a church out of medical claims because they're helping people improve their health. So I really, really like Medicaid. I like vulnerable populations, and I feel like there's a huge opportunity to build businesses that impact that population that have largely, not gotten the attention that they needed from the startup community.
Wow. I mean, yeah, you're right. That's a huge opportunity. And I think that will be something that we see growing in the market and continuing to be a need that's always going to be there.
Yeah.
So I guess I would love to just kind of give our listeners some insight. How can they learn more about Coplex and where should they go?
Yeah, reach out to us at hello@coplex.com. Feel free to reach out to me, Brenda@coplex.com. I've got a pretty, I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. So if you want to look me up on LinkedIn, I'm happy to, people direct message me there quite a bit. So yeah, follow us on social, but feel free to reach out if you want to learn more.
Perfect. Well, I'm super excited, and I've always been a huge advocate of Coplex, and I love all of the things that you're doing, and I just can't wait to see you guys, just grow and help everyone else grow. It's such an amazing thing. But
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
All right, take care.